Hey guys, welcome to our AGInow podcast. Today I have with me Ayush. Ayush has been a critical part of building SuperAGI. Welcome Ayush to the show.
Thanks, Ishaan. Thanks for inviting me to the show.
You can maybe talk a bit about your background, what sort of
Yeah, sure.
led you to coding. Since when have you been developing, and you've been part of a lot of open source projects as well. So maybe if you can talk about your journey.
Sure. So the coding journey, I'll say I started in my first years or like maybe before college only. It started as a generic development part. I wanted to build something. I was not from the particular coding background earlier before that. So I started with JavaScript and all. Then I think in 2020 when the corona hit and I had a lot of time, so I started with the open source thing, working with looking into different open source projects, and I got like amazed by how these guys are building in public. Whatever they are building, the codes are available in public. You can tinker with it, you can change it, or you can do anything with that, and that led me to the open source contribution part. I think the first contribution I did was with Hacktoberfest. It's a beginner fest for the open source contribution. I think I did some small JavaScript changes of 5-6 line of codes, and that was the starting point, starting base.
But was your PR immediately accepted?
It took some time though, because Hacktoberfest is a competitive thing. So a lot of people
So
start
maybe
coming.
if you can double click a bit on that. I've heard Hacktoberfest quite a few times.
Sure.
But what is it? What kind of, let's say, projects participate in that? And who are generally the people who participate? Is it like a global event?
Yeah, it is a global event.
Okay.
I don't know the actual organizer of that. I think this is a community of original people who do this in a large manner. How does it work is basically whatever project, if someone is building a open source project on GitHub or any other Git based version control system, so they can register their project on for the Hacktoberfest thing, and if it's got selected, then people for around the world, they create some Hacktoberfest first issue type of issues
Sure.
in their particular project in GitHub, and you can just go and you can contribute to the Hacktoberfest thing. And then they also reward people with different merchandise, also like t-shirts and all, just to make you like more accommodated into the particular open source ecosystem, just build into it. So that's how Hacktoberfest part works.
Got it. And generally this is spread across multiple days per week. Like what
Yeah,
are
yeah,
they?
it's overall for the whole October. So because of the name also, so it's
Okay.
Hacktoberfest. So it's just around the for the complete October. I think it starts from 1 October to 29 or something like that.
Okay.
So you can build, you can tinker around, you can ship for 1 month. You get the time for that.
Got it. Got it. So you then, like, what was the project? Do you remember where you contributed?
So I cannot recall the exact name of the project. It was a small project. I was not contributing much,
Okay.
but I just contributed to the small code base of JavaScript.
But
like
I'm
five
sure
line
the
of-
feeling would have been amazing, right?
Yeah,
Like,
sure,
to
sure.
contribute and get that accepted.
So the dopamine rush you get when you see you created something and it's like, yeah, it's merged in a big code base where all the other people are also contributing. So as a newbie, it felt so good. Like I can't express the word. Whoever is developing, they can
Yeah.
connect with the feeling.
Right,
So
right. Hey, awesome, awesome. So that was your journey, your start into open source projects.
yeah.
Then what were the other projects that you participated in or that you contributed to?
So just after that part, it enabled me to just start contributing to others project also. So I just go with there's a event called Kharagpur Winter of Code, which is organized by IIT Kharagpur. I participated in that. Then there was other somewhat of code and Winter of Code type of projects. This open source thing, I just start contributing to them. Girl script and a lot of things I start
Sorry, which
contributing.
script?
Girl script.
Okay.
Girl script, somewhat of code. GSSOC.
Got
So
it.
this is also a big organization where you
Sure.
can just do open source contribution.
Got it.
You give them your idea, particular idea, and with the idea is selected, you work with the mentors for like I think 2 months, 3 months of the time duration to complete that particular project.
Got it. So let's say if we have to recommend to somebody who's a newbie who has done some coding to sort of participate and start participating more in open source projects, what advice would you give them?
So first thing I'll say is, as soon as you start coding, just go explore open source projects. Like they are the base fundamentals. And I will also say that they are the future of the coding platform also, because everything is going open source. So the first thing I'll say is just start reading the codes, because reading will be the first step you have to take before writing the code. Just see how codes are written in a big code bases, how the architecture works, because you don't get that particular experience when you are developing your own projects. You will get that whenever you are reading the code base of another GitHub project. So just start reading the code, tinker with the code a bit, and then if you are feeling comfortable, don't hesitate. Just go do something, even if it's a small pull request. Just do it. Raise the pull request. The worst thing that can be is the pull request can be neglected, and that doesn't matter. It happened in open source a lot of times. So,
Right.
and the best thing, it will get accepted. So you will be part of the contributor who are contributing to a big open source project or big code base.
Right, right. And generally, like from your college, were there other people also who were part of like these fest or like these kind of coding competition and open source projects, or were you like an outlier back in college? Like, I just want to understand what was the kind of community atmosphere which was there that led you to sort of like double click on that.
Sure. I think I would say in my college there was some coding communities, but they were not much active. So there was a GSOC community, basically a Google Cloud community there. So I was the lead of that community after my second year of the college. So, but it was after I started the open source. The open source thing was just clicked when I was just exploring. Honestly, I was trying to find something meaningful to do in whenever the lockdown part hit, and that just led me to open source thing. And then I realized how big of an ecosystem and how big of an area that is to explore.
No, it's interesting. Like a lot of people that I had been meeting and talking to, a lot of those folks actually discovered their true passion during the lockdown time.
Yeah.
So it's a good forcing function when you have solitude, when you have a lot of time in hand, when you don't have to travel or commute. That is when you really connect to your deep passion. Some of the people, I think most of the people discovered their passion for cooking, and other people sort of discovered their passion for different genre of like media consumption. Like for example, I know personally a friend who had never probably seen an animated movie in his entire life. When lockdown happened, he started with Spirited Away, which is Studio Gilby's movie, and he became probably one of those people who would have seen every single Studio Gilby movie, every single series which is even in the similar genre in anime. So I think it's a great kind of a segue to kind of discover your passions, right? And like when you have solitude, when you have time at hand, I think that's when you discovered like coding for you. I think I'm sure a lot of other people would have discovered some other passions. No, amazing. And so tell me about, let's say, your interest particularly in AI. I know you have been contributing to a lot of different projects, and a lot of those were workflows, software, different projects. But what was your initial sort of way to like get into AI? Like what was those initial things that led you into AI particularly?
I have from the earlier days also, I was like a technological enthusiast. I was trying to explore every new single trend. I was trying to hop on the train, whatever the new single trend was going on. This thing was, I was working with.
Were you also there in crypto?
Yeah, I was in the Web3
Okay,
ecosystem for like 1
okay.
year, I think. So I was just working with Web3, and then after that I got into machine learning first. I explored machine learning part, and then I realized, yeah, this is something which is much bigger, and in the coming part of that, this is going to change stuff. This is obviously going to disrupt whatever we have today, the architecture we have today. This is going to disrupt that, because in 2020 or 2021, as much as I know, very few companies were using AI at its like original capability. Machine learning was there obviously, but the deep learning part and convolutional
But
neural
mostly
network.
it was linear regression, I would say.
Exactly, yeah. They just linear regression, this part, logistic regression, they were just stuff tinkering around with this thing. The main AI part I came into is with the rise of GPT, I would say. So basically, when I just got familiarized with GPT-3, it was the early days of GPT-3, and I just
So
started
I
building
have a
stuff
very
on that.
interesting question here.
Yeah.
So all the people that I generally sort of talk to, I ask this question. When you first time discovered ChatGPT, what were the few set of questions that you asked? Because that tells a lot about that person, right? Because you give technology to people and they have different kind of use cases that they come up with, different kind of questions they would want to ask, right? So ChatGPT also, I believe, when people discovered the true power of it, at the same time, I think they were amazed to see those one or two questions were answered by ChatGPT that blew their
Exactly.
mind.
Yeah.
So what was that moment for you when you like, okay, this is big, this is different, this is not, let's say, any of the other incremental development which has been happening in AI, but this is truly a paradigm shift. So what were the set of questions that blew your mind that got answered by ChatGPT?
Before ChatGPT also, I was familiar with the GPT-3. So I just tinkered with the playground part a bit before.
Okay.
But when the ChatGPT come, I thought it's just like any other chatbots apps. So my first question was, "Who are you?" I just asked it, and it was like, "I'm
Such a deep
ChatGPT."
existential question. No?
Yeah.
Who are you?
Exactly. It just gave me the answer that I am a AI assistant and all
Okay.
the other thing. The generic answer you
That
get
is the
from that.
part that has been sort of put in a certain format through reinforcement learning.
Yeah,
So that
exactly.
it kind
Into
of
that.
doesn't deviate too much.
For the second question was interesting. I just asked it, "Are you conscious?" because I wanted to know, and it was like, no, I am an AI assistant. Then I start barging with it with new questions like current data. Then I get to know it's only limited to September 2021. Then after that, obviously, I think everyone who has tried ChatGPT before, and if you are an AI enthusiast, you just fell in love with it.
Correct.
It's so good. And the first day only.
But you also mentioned that you had started playing around with OpenAI ecosystem with ChatGPT 3 as well, with Playground and the APIs, etc. So were you using APIs at that time or Playground? How were you using it? And what was the reaction at that time?
Sure. So the API part, I just create a Rust program. I was learning Rust at that time, so I just build something related to a Rust. It was a SQL text to SQL converter type of thing, and I just used Chat GPT 3 API first time at that time.
Okay.
It was, I think, 6-7 months before the Chat GPT came. Normally, I was just tinkering around in the Playground ecosystem. What are the question I wanted to ask? Just playing with Chat GPT, not a particular something useful.
Right.
Just testing it out
Got
out
it.
of curiosity.
Interesting, interesting. I think for me it was, I think the first set of questions which I asked were like, about scientific discoveries. I think I was trying to probe ChatGPT to see that can it create new knowledge versus sort of mixing and matching the existing knowledge that it has. But to my surprise, it gave a very, very nuanced kind of answer and it incrementally created certain new information as well, which to me was really the fact where, like, it just blew my mind.
Yeah, exactly.
So I think like, talking about ChatGPT, right? So I think for me, the fact that it can create more knowledge than what is available out there, I think that was a very powerful notion. And that was the moment I realized like this could be really powerful for us to like create new kind of knowledge versus let's say the search or some of the other technologies which had been there, which essentially indexed the current information and helped us retrieve that better. But this was a tool or technology which was capable to mix and match different things, keep different aspects in mind, and create something which was not there in the world. But awesome. So tell me, Ayush, about your journey within sort of Super AGI and how you sort of came up with the idea. Because I remember like when we were sort of building out autonomous generative marketing tool at Contlo, we were looking at a lot of these technologies, right? Whether it's AutoGPT, Baby AGI, some of the other frameworks. And then we quickly realized that the existing infrastructure is not there to support the kind of use cases that we wanted to enable. And we were clearly seeing a trend wherein the software itself was going and becoming more declarative in nature versus imperative in nature. In imperative software, you click this, drag that, and in imperative or a declarative way, you tell the AI what needs to be done, and the AI does it for you. And that was not something which was possible by using the plain vanilla LLMs, and that had to use like a autonomous or something autonomous agent or some kind of AI which is able to break down the task and execute on those tasks, right? So tell me about the first time that you played around with some of these libraries. What were the challenges that you faced, and what led you to the creation of what you were calling it Super Baby AGI initially?
Sure. So the journey of Super AGI started in a very different manner as usual, I would say. We were working on developing an autonomous agent for the Contlo part. I was doing the research and development for the same, or whatever the different frameworks, I would say. Maybe they are, because they are not frameworks, but different sort of agents available in the market. So I just look into Auto GPT. I was looking into Baby AGI, Agent GPT, all those sort of things, and I was like, yeah, this is a good framework where they are just running one single script for running the LLM part. I just got fascinated by it, but I just found out there are some issues with that. There are some limitations. It was not able to interact with the web, and a lot of other features like response, the action management was not good enough. So I just started creating something of my own after inspired by that, and I just created something. It was a proof of concept, basically, I would say. And because it was the extended version of Baby AGI, I just named it Super Baby AGI initially. So the name Super Baby AGI originated from there. After that, the presentation was that, and everyone liked it, and then we start working on the Super AGI part, building something which is totally different from the existing model that we have. Basically, a complete framework, not just a particular tool. So we introduce a lot of number of entities like agents, agent flows, different execution flows. We start building on it. We made it rigid so that it can follow a traditional type of backend structure also. Not everything should be generated by LLM itself.
So state management also like was something that we were looking to solve like via let's say using some of the DBs in the framework, etc. Because I think one of the key pain point initially was how do you let's say do the state management for the agents? They were like cool scripts running in the command line, but how do you essentially do something useful there? And to do something useful, I think state management was a critical like component there.
It was a very critical component because earlier there was no state management there. You just open the particular tool like Auto GPT or near the baby AGI, you just work on it and then it forgets everything. It was not maintaining the state, or everything was not getting particularly stored as such. So we tried to build it some way to maintain the state. We tried to integrate databases, their LTM, long-term memory, short-term memory, so that we are able to continue with
But
the
for the
flow.
audience, can you maybe double click a bit on LTM, STM, what those are, and maybe
Sure,
just
sure.
break down a bit?
So LTM and STM, basically these are the terminology which is most commonly used in the autonomous agent worlds. So LTM generally stands for long-term memory and STM is short-term memory. So for example, if you consider agent as an entity, it has different components and memory is one of them. So LTM and STM are the type of this particular memory of the agent. So short-term memory, if you say, is basically when an agent is running in a particular flow, in that particular flow, it maintain a context of whatever you are talking earlier. If you take example of Chat GPT also, so if you talk with Chat GPT, it remembers what you asked it like 6-7 messages ago also. So that's the context management, which is short-term memory. LTM is a broader use case. Basically, it's a long-term memory. We use vector databases for that. We create embeddings of whatever the earlier knowledge the LTM is gaining. We create embeddings for that, and those embeddings it act as a knowledge for the particular agent. So LTM is a long-term memory of that, like a human memory when you recall something else.
Right.
It's
Got it.
This is the particular basic difference between.
Got it. But for STM, you're saying like, vector DBs don't make sense. Those are the rolling window, last five
Yeah.
actions that the agent has taken.
Exactly.
And LTM, since the quantum of the sort of task and the agent feed becomes so large, you have to vectorize it
Yes.
for agent to
Yeah.
be able to access it whenever it needs it.
Yeah. Because it becomes so large, the data, you cannot
Right.
store it in a traditional manner.
Right, right. Got it, got it. And tell me, so from like, they're building out initially Super Baby AGI, which turned into Super AGI,
Yeah.
and solving some of the core problems. I remember having that conversation wherein like running multiple concurrent agents was
Yeah.
also a problem that we solved with Super AGI, which none of the existing frameworks were essentially
Exactly.
supporting it. But beyond that, what were the other sort of pain points that you saw that we decided to solve from SuperAGI? I know we have talked about it, but I think for the audience, if we can talk about things like agent trajectory fine tuning, or let's say if we can talk about how can people build tools easily, because I think tools are a critical component for an agent to really
Exactly, yeah.
execute in the knowledge world. So what were the thought process there in terms of building out tools and solving some of the other pain points?
In the early days of SuperAGI, we had to figure out what are the different components we have to incorporate, and tools was one of them. So basically, tools available in the Auto GPT or in Baby AGI, there were some traditional functions that they were using, and these functions were invoked by the LLM to do a certain set of tasks. What we tend to use was, we just saw that a tool can be more descriptive, more generalized. Every single company, or if we consider organization, or even some personal use cases also, a person may want to build their own set of tools. So first thing we thought was, the main thing was to give people capability to build tools. That was one big use case that we solved. Nobody else was doing it earlier. And I think Auto GPT has the plugin system also, but it was not working. I think I tested it. For me, it was not working as expected. So we tried to like modularize it, try to give it a particular set of actions that people need to follow to build a particular tool. Similar to that, like other things I would also say is agent execution. That thing was there. So we tried to, agent execution earlier on was very like in a broad way, so hallucinations were there for Baby AGI and Auto GPT. So the main task we had was, and I think a lot of companies or people who are trying to work with LLM is to reduce this type of hallucination, or just give LLM the whole capability to do the task. So we reduced this by fine tuning whatever the execution model we had. We fine tuned it to follow a certain set of tasks by even after leveraging the LLM capabilities.
Right.
So this was the big pain point I'll say we solved earlier on. Apart from that, we are continuously working on that also. So right now also we are trying to include different set of features of, like we are trying to give it new things here also. So I think agent cluster is one of the things we are going to bring right now,
Right.
where the cluster of agents, basically we started with one single agent in the
Right.
Super AGI,
Right.
like the other architectures have, and we just build on top of that. Right now we are building the cluster of agents where you can leverage different agents at once concurrently to complete a set of tasks with much broader task also for a particular
But
organization.
do you think is it fair to say an agent cluster would be an equivalent of like how a team works in an organization, wherein you have like one manager, then you have multiple people who are working along with them. People have certain specializations, right? So in this cluster, sort of conjecture there in terms of like saying what all a cluster can do that an agent can't do.
Sure. So I think it's very good that you mentioned that, because that's the exact inspiration we got it from, to just build a whole organization sort of thing. So basically, in a particular agent cluster, basically right now how we build is a particular agent earlier was able to do a particular task. It has some sort of knowledge just like a human being. For example, if someone is a front-end developer, so you give him a front-end task and he's going to do it. Similar to that, an agent was able to do a particular task. But for example, if you give someone a big task like to build a complete website or bring a complete architecture, a product, so it requires front end, back end, design, and all sort of things. So for that part, multiple knowledges, different type of knowledges are required, and for that, multiple agents are required, which should work with each other, which should talk with each other, and work at once together to solve this problem. For that, we bring the concept of this master agent and the slave agent problem, where a particular master agent will give a set of commands. Like, yeah, this is the things that you have to do after getting a broad problem statement. And these problems, these small sub problems are picked up by the agents to complete it, depending upon their capacity and how they are trained to do, what knowledge they have. So this will act similar to a particular organization, how an organization work, basically how a team works in a system, a manager and all the other developers, product, all this team works.
Right. And also, I think one of the key thing here would be that I know we have spoken about it,
Yeah.
is how these agents are talking among each other, and also what is the shared task list or what is the shared status management that they're able to do, right? And also potentially the shared memory part as well. So can you talk a bit about the communication part, right? So we came up with something called ACP, Agent to Agent Communication Protocol. But why is that important in the context of an agent cluster? If you can maybe talk about that a bit.
Sure, sure. So basically, right now, the agent architecture that we have in the market, the agent is a standalone element and it has its own memory, and it cannot share the memory with other agents or any other entity, for example. So there are certain limitations here, because if you see as a human, we have a tendency to share our knowledge to each other just to make our task more efficient in a manner, especially in a team. So we try to implement the same thing in agents also, so that the memory of one agent can be accessed by the another agents also. So if a particular task is needed, if to be done, and a particular agent can't do it, if the memory is shared, another agent can pick up that task and it will able to execute that task concurrently. So it will not get blocked because of that particular thing, or the hallucination part or any other such things will not be there. So that was the main issue.
So very similar to, let's say, when we are working in when we are working in a larger group in an organization, we use tools like Trello to like manage the task and assign tasks to people, and also at the same time we use things like Miro to essentially collaborate on certain common projects together. So is it fair to say like that's like really the extension of shared memory, shared task list, and let's say the communication part between the agents?
Yeah, exactly. That's a very good example actually. So Miro and Google Doc, and wherever we do collaborative work as a human, that is similar to agents going to talk to each other using the agent-to-agent communication protocol.
Right.
We are doing the research on that part and we are going to implement it.
Right, right. No, makes sense. And talking a bit about, I think, the templatization part. So we have launched Marketplace, and then we are creating this sliced templates for specialized agents there, which organizations and people can just pick up and start using it. So in that order, we also created something that you sort of built was SuperCoder.
Yeah.
So talk a bit about that. What is SuperCoder? What all is it capable of? And what is the future of SuperCoder? Maybe start by defining what SuperCoder is.
Sure. So SuperCoder is basically, right now we have an AI template. So SuperCoder is an AI template that we have on SuperAGI, which you can use to create an end-to-end whole project system, which can with a multiple file, different sort of projects, specification, unit test, all sort of things you can create at once. So there was no such tools in my memory that was available before which can do that. Earlier, you can leverage ChatGPT or other these sort of LLM thing to just create a single file or just debug a particular code. But there was no possibility, like you give a particular goal, like, hey, go and make me a game of Pac-Man or some sort of things, and you will get a set of files like where 10 14 files and the whole project is done at once. So code base. So I start building on that part only. So that was the use case. We tried to make the life of developers a bit easy in a way, and that brings us to the SuperCoder part. So in SuperCoder, going into a bit of technicality, so in SuperCoder we have we are using tools in SuperAGI. So commonly, so SuperCoder also has some set of tools basically. So we created a tool for the specification writing, another tool for the code writing and code management. Another one was to improve the code so that the code is going to be improved. And another thing was to write unit test. So all of these tools were working together in a certain set of flows to create a end-to-end project.
Right.
Basically from the start, from the front end to the back end to the database to the unit test, all those sort of thing was created at once.
Right.
This was
So basically, instead of what you're saying is that using ChatGPT to write maybe a piece of code or a small snippet of code, using autonomous approach and agents for writing the code enables, let's say, folks to develop entire projects and which can have multiple files, different logics, different architecture, all of those things.
Exactly. So imagine earlier, if you wanted to generate a work on a project part, you will have to do 20 to 25 prompts in Chat GPT, and it
Correct.
was a tedious task to do it. It used to take some time. Obviously, it's easier to compare to the writing on your own, but it's still tedious. And we just tried to resolve it also. Just give a particular problem statement, and every single code files will be written for you. So that sort of thing we try to build here.
And do you see a future where most of the code being written essentially will be done by the likes of, let's say, SuperCoder and autonomous agents? Because I think software inherently is a very complex craft, right? You need to have context about different pieces within the project, and you need to know how to execute and write logic and code there. So do you think the future of coding will be done to large part, or the heavy lifting will be done by the agents?
I think I'm a huge supporter of this thing because right now also a lot of LLMs are being leveraged for this code generation part, and you can generate the whole code files and whole code things. Even using our SuperCoder, you can generate right now the whole project also. So right now you can generate the whole project. In the future part of that, a lot of things, LLMs are getting intelligent. They are able to have good reasoning capabilities just like human. So it's very fair to say that a large chunk of code, whatever the particular, you just give it a use case, and an LLM type of framework and architecture will be able to find how to just go around with how to solve this particular problem using different solution and what's the most optimal solution to solve this thing. And the whole code bases will be generated by the same.
Right.
Even I think recently I just came across a particular LLM which has a context limit of 80,000 characters or something.
Yeah.
And I think that sort of LLMs are able to accommodate the whole Google code base in the single prompt. So you can see how this way dynamic is going on regarding LLM. So in the future, we can see that right now we are solving the context issue. As soon as we solve the reasoning issue with that, so context and reasoning mixed together, surely they will be able to take over the code base part and writing codes for that.
Got it. Awesome. No, awesome, Ayush. This was a very interesting, conversation. And I look forward to, sort of chat more, to you about SuperAGI and SuperCoder and generally the state of generative AI. Thanks for coming on the show, and I look forward to chat again.
Sure. Thanks, Iran. Thanks for having me. And yeah, let's build together on SuperAGI. You have to continually explore on this thing.
Absolutely. Awesome.